My son cut me off for 20 years. 20. Entire decades of silence. Not even courtesy of a Merry Christmas. Dad, please die quietly. I sent letters, cards, little gestures. He sent them back unopened, which is impressive, really, because ignoring me took actual effort. Then, as soon as I become rich, poof, like magic. Suddenly I'm invited to Christmas dinner. Family time, he calls it. Oh, family time. Yes, because nothing screams bonding like 2 decades of emotional ghosting followed by a last-minute invite. But don't worry, I had a plan. I turned up at his house with my best jolly old dad smile and said, I have a surprise for you. And oh, their faces lit up like Christmas trees at Harrods. You could practically see the pound sign spinning in their pupils. But then they saw what I'd actually brought, and suddenly we were less home alone and more paranormal activity. Faces pale, smiles gone. And that was before the turkey. But hold on, let's rewind, shall we? Because this story really began with a phone call. The kind of phone call that makes you wish you let it go to voicemail and carried on suffering in peace. There I was, enjoying the quiet monotony of my evening in Lincoln, when the phone rang. A shrill, ugly ring that made me think, ah yes, another telemarketer desperate to sell me double glazing. I almost ignored it. God knows I should have. But fate decided to punish me for still having hope. Dad. That was it. 1 word. 2 syllables. And just like that, 20 years of silence evaporated, replaced by a casual little greeting. As if we'd just spoken last week about being collection day. Nicholas. I said, clutching the receiver like it might sprout fangs. This is unexpected. Cue his nervous laugh. The same one he used as a child whenever he'd been caught nicking biscuits. Yeah, well listen, Christmas is coming up. Meline and I thought, family time. Family time. The words tasted like battery acid. I stared at the old family photo on the table. Nicholas, 8 years old, grinning. Before life and his mother convinced him I was about as useful as a chocolate teapot. A while. I snapped. Nicholas, you haven't returned my calls in 2 decades. Do you remember the birthday cards? The graduation gift? The letters? All of them came back unopened, like a boomerang of disappointment. Oh, Dad, I've been busy, he said, as if juggling Netflix and IKEA furniture assembly for 20 years explained everything. Busy, right? Too busy for your father. But miraculously free the minute my lottery win hit the papers. Because yes, and I said this with the calmness of a man polishing a shotgun, 15 million, front page. Quite the coincidence, the sudden reconnecting. Long pause. The kind of pause where you can actually hear someone thinking of a lie. No, Dad, it's not that, he stammered. We just thought it would be nice to reconnect. You're getting older, I'm getting older. Oh, yes, we're all getting older. Thank you, Dr. Obvious. Where were you when I had heart surgery, Nicholas? Where were you for Christmas after Christmas in this echo chamber of a house? Ah. But now, suddenly we're all about family. But fine, I agreed, because I had a surprise. And nothing says Christmas spirit like weaponizing irony. I hung up the phone with the grace of a man who's just signed up for a bloodbath. Then I stared out at the snow, thinking of the last time I'd seen my son's face. 20 years gone, and yet the wounds were still sharp, tucked away under layers of resignation. The kind of scars you pretend don't exist, until fate rings your phone at dinner time. And of course, as the snow fell, I remembered how it all began. Ah yes, 20 years ago. My wife, Meline, standing in our bedroom, suitcases wide open, like open wounds with wheels. You're pathetic, Stanley, she'd said, sharp as a guillotine. 45 years old, and what do you have? A dead-end job, a mortgage we can't afford, dreams that'll never come true. I'd stood there like an idiot, thinking we were happy, which, in hindsight, was about as accurate as saying Titanic was unsinkable. She laughed, not the nice kind, more like shattered glass being swept into the bin. Robert treats me like a queen, she sneered. Robert, the one with the BMW and corner office. Robert, who'd probably worn cologne that cost more than my monthly wage. And Nicholas? I asked, like a fool still playing the family first card. He needs stability. He needs a winner for a father. Translation. Robert had a company credit card. I had a loyalty card at Tesco. The divorce was fast, vicious, and about as fair as a three-legged horse race. She walked away with the house, the car, and Nicholas's loyalty, which, let's be honest, wasn't much of a fight. He was 18, old enough to choose, and naturally he chose money, status, and shiny things over dear old dad's midlife crisis and battered kettle. And just like that, I was left with nothing, except, of course, the bitter taste of betrayal and a rental kitchen with wallpaper that should have been outlawed by Geneva Convention. And then 20 years of silence. Until now, 20 years. That's how long my son managed to perfect the art of return to sender. Every birthday card, every Christmas letter, every half-pathetic attempt I made at reminding him I still existed, back through the letterbox as if I tried to send anthrax. Phone calls? Straight to voicemail. Christmas mornings? Picture it. Me, alone with a plate of overcooked Brussels sprouts for company. Utterly magical. I learned to live with it. Of course. One has to. You make peace with the silence. You learn to find joy in small things. A decent book, the neighbor bringing in your bin, a crossword you don't entirely botch. But deep down, there's still that whisper, that tiny ember hope, that maybe one day your son will remember the man who taught him to ride a bike, who sat up all night spoon-feeding him medicine when he had pneumonia, who loved him unconditionally even when it was spectacularly inconvenient. And then, the lottery. 15 million tax-free. Because apparently even the universe enjoys a plot twist. Bought the ticket on a whim at Casey's General Store, won big, and suddenly, boom, I'm interesting again. Local news, state papers, my face on the bloody front page like Lincoln's answer to Scrooge McDuck. And wouldn't you know it, the phone starts ringing. Old friends crawling out of the woodwork like cockroaches after a spilt pint. Cousins I didn't know I had. Relatives whose only claim to me is they once borrowed a casserole dish in 1987. All desperate to reconnect. Isn't money marvelous? It's basically human catnip. Then came the call. The one I'd been both waiting for and dreading. Nicholas. At last. So I walked over to my desk and pulled out the folder. My pride and joy. Neatly stacked with bank statements, investments, legal papers. Everything to prove that the man they've written off 20 years ago as a failure had quietly been building an empire. You know, just a little light reading to spice up Christmas dinner. Outside, snow fell. Pure, pristine, poetic. I smiled. Oh! I'd given their surprise. All right, just not the one they were salivating for. Because 20 years is a long time to be ignored, and longer still to plan your revenge. Justice, I learned, is best served cold, preferably with turkey. Funny thing is, I hadn't planned any of this. Not at first. After the divorce, when the loneliness had settled into my bones like Lincoln's endless bloody winter, I needed something. Something other than microwave lasagna and long conversations with the kettle. And that's when I discovered I had a gift for numbers. Not just the boring accounting stuff. Oh no. The kind of numbers that build empires out of dust and stubborn spite. It started small. 2008. A foreclosure notice in the paper. Shabby duplex, South Side. Cheap enough to tempt even a man whose most exciting investment until then was a Tesco club card. Everyone else was running from the housing market, like it was on fire. Me? I thought, why not run in? I drove past on my lunch break, squinting at its peeling paint and overgrown garden. It was tragic, but underneath, good bones. Like me, really. Outdated wallpaper. Cracks showing, but still technically standing. That night, I had newspaper clippings spread across the kitchen table, like a detective solving a murder. Mortgage rates, property values, market predictions. It was like Wall Street, but with worse lighting and fewer cigars. The banker looked at me like I'd asked to invest in Beanie Babies. You sure about this, Mr. Brooks? Real estate's dangerous right now. I'm sure, I said, signing the papers with the enthusiasm of a man betting his life savings on a three-legged horse. My heart was pounding, but my hand was steady. The duplex became my passion project. Nights after work, tools rattling in the boot, me fixing leaks, scraping paint, replacing boards. I discovered physical labor is surprisingly therapeutic when you're fueled by bitterness and instant noodles. 6 months later, tenants moved in. Lovely young couple, thrilled to have 4 walls that didn't leak. Their rent covered my mortgage with a smidge left over. I reinvested immediately. Another property, then another. While the world cried recession, I was quietly building my kingdom. By 2015, 12 properties. By 2020, 23. I was still living in the same rental, driving the same Honda, wearing the same Marks and bloody Spencer jumpers. Outwardly, boring. Inwardly, a financial assassin. The lottery win? That was luck. Sure. But it fell on top of everything I had built with sheer bloody-minded determination. And now, I was worth more than Nicholas could possibly imagine. More than Meline would ever believe. Not that belief had ever been her strong suit. Midnight ticked by. The snow stopped. Lincoln sat there in silence, wrapped in white like it was posing for a Christmas card. Tomorrow would bring my chance to prove to them that the man they dismissed as a loser was now something far more dangerous. Successful, bitter, and very well prepared. Did Nicholas know the full extent of what I'd accomplished? Doubtful. In his mind, I was still the pitiful man they'd left behind. But that man was gone, replaced by someone who turned loneliness into power, failure into property portfolios, silence into spreadsheets. I leaned back, listening to the old house creak around me. Christmas Eve was nearly here, and I was ready. The next morning, snow dusted the windows. I was mid-sip with my coffee when the phone rang again. 2 calls in 2 days after 20 years of silence, which, frankly, was suspicious enough to qualify as a biblical miracle. Stanley. Meline's voice, like a cold wind through a broken window. Still that breathy tone she used whenever she wanted something, though now frayed at the edges by age. I hope you don't mind me calling. Nicholas gave me your number. How thoughtful. Like passing round a family heirloom nobody wanted. I know things ended badly, she said. Oh, is that what we're calling it now? But we have a son together. That has to count for something, right? Then she dropped it. Nicholas is in trouble. Stanley. Real trouble. He needs help. And I thought, well, with your recent good fortune. I could hear rustling, whispered voices in the background. And then, faint but unmistakable, Nicholas's voice, drifting to the receiver like a ghost. Ask for more. Tell him it's urgent. I could hear the whispering behind her voice, like a badly written soap opera where no one bothers to mute the mic. What kind of trouble? I asked, all calm and neutral, while my grip on the phone suggested otherwise. Oh, business. The startup world. So volatile. She said like she was describing the weather, as if my son's financial collapse was just a light drizzle. Investors breathing down his neck. If he doesn't come up with the money soon, she let the sentence dangle like bait on a hook. I waited. Always performance with her. I hate to ask, Stanley, but could you help? For old time's sake. Yes, old time sake. The divorce hearings, the insults, the bit where she took the house, the car, and my child. Such warm, fuzzy memories. More whispering. Then, deliver with the elegance of a dagger wrapped in tinsel. Say it's for the grandkids' future. It's for the grandkids' future, she parroted, now in full Oscar-winning performance mode. You wouldn't want them to suffer because of business problems, would you? I stared at my coffee, steam curling upwards like it knew the punchline before I did. How many times had I fallen for this trick? Manufactured crisis, crocodile tears, guilt served piping hot. She knew exactly which buttons to push. Shame she'd forgotten I'd changed the control panel. How much? I asked flatly. Well, 200,000 would cover the immediate problems. But if you could stretch to 300, another whisper. Maybe 400, just to be safe. I almost laughed. 400,000. Tossed out as casually as asking me to lend her a cup of sugar. I see. Stanley, I know you're angry about the past, but this is bigger than our problems. This is about family, about doing what's right. What's right? I repeated, rolling the words in my mouth like a fine wine, except it tasted more like vinegar. Tell me, Meline, what was right about 20 years of silence? About returning birthday cards unopened? About teaching Nicholas that his father was nothing more than a stranger? Her voice hardened, the fake tears drying up instantly. That's ancient history. We're talking about now. About your son's future. Not a cent. The words came out so clean, so final. It almost surprised me. What? She sounded genuinely shocked, as though I just announced I canceled Christmas. Stanley, you can't be serious. You won millions. What's a few $100,000 to help your own son? Not a cent, I repeated. Calm. Final. But you love him. You're his father. How can you just abandon him when he needs you most? I thought of all the years I needed them, of all the times my calls were ignored, letters returned, holidays spent alone. And then I said the only thing that fit. I learned from the best. A sharp inhale. Then the line went dead. Hung up on me, just like the old days. I set the phone down and looked out at the snow. Funny, the silence felt different this time. Not empty. Full of possibility. Full of the knowledge that for once, I'd pass a test. 20 years ago, I'd have written the check. I'd have begged, bribed, bought my way back into their affections. But the man I'd become knew better. Respect cannot be purchased. And love that comes with an invoice is just extortion with better branding. I finished my coffee and started planning my next move. Christmas Eve was still days away, and I had no doubt Nicholas and his mother would try again. Good. Let them. I'd waited 20 years for this. I could wait a few more days. The phone sat there, silent, and I almost wish it would ring again. Each call made my Christmas surprise just a little sweeter, a little more justified. They thought they were playing me. They had no idea who they were really up against. Sleep was impossible that night. By dawn, I knew what I had to do. The morning light stretched across my kitchen floor as I sat with my coffee, staring at the phone. Time for one final test. One last confirmation of what I already suspected. I dialed Nicholas's number. My fingers steady, my heart already cold. Dad! He sounded surprised. Maybe even pleased. That's new. I've been thinking, I said, about what your mother told me yesterday. About your problems. Oh, that! His voice shifted instantly, guarded, cautious. She probably made it sound worse than it is. You know how she worries. I leaned back, watching the wind rattle the window. Actually, Nicholas, I called because I have some problems of my own. A pause. Problems? Financial ones. I let the words hang, savoring the tension. I'm afraid I made some terrible decisions with my lottery winnings. Got caught up in cryptocurrency. You know, Bitcoin, Ethereum, all those shiny digital things. Oh no. But there was no sympathy. Just quick calculation. You could almost hear the cogs grinding as he tried to work out what this meant for him. How bad is it? Pretty bad. Lost most of it in a crash last week. They warned me it was volatile, but I thought I knew better. I paused, letting the lie breathe. Might just have enough left to cover Christmas dinner, but not much more. Silence. The kind where you can hear someone's soul reprogramming. Well, he said finally, his voice colder than a Lincoln blizzard. That's really unfortunate, Dad. I guess these things happen. They do. I waited. A chance for him to offer comfort. To show something resembling care. Anything. Instead, so, about Christmas. He cleared his throat. Maybe it'd be better if you didn't come this year. You know, with everything you're dealing with, you probably need to focus on your finances. There it was. The mask ripped clean off. I see. So the invitation is off the table. It's just you understand, right? Meline's been planning this big meal. We were counting on, well, anyway, less stress this way. For everyone. Less stress. I nodded to myself. Of course. I wouldn't want to burden you with my presence. Dad, don't be like that. It's just practical. When you get back on your feet, we'll definitely get together. When I get back on my feet, I repeated with a grim smile. Look, I've got a conference call in 5 minutes. We'll talk soon, yeah? The line went dead before I could answer. I set the phone down and stared at the snow-covered street. 20 years of silence, and the second they thought I was broke, it was back to radio silence. Family, yeah? Absolutely priceless. Which is fortunate, because they won't be getting a penny. I knew it was coming. Of course I did. Doesn't mean it didn't sting like lemon juice in a paper cut when it finally landed. Not because I was shocked. Oh no. Surprise died in me a long time ago, but because it confirmed everything I already suspected. Love with conditions isn't love. It's a bloody invoice. So, I stood at the window, hand pressed against the cold glass, staring out at my neighbors. Normal people, warming up their cars, shoveling snow, probably moaning about bin collections or soggy Weetabix. People who, I imagine, don't have to audition for their family's affection with a checkbook. Must be nice. The test was done. Verdict delivered. Time for sentencing. I spent the afternoon doing what any responsible father does after being emotionally mugged. A little casual espionage. My old business network coughed up the goods. Turns out Nicholas's shiny little startup wasn't a game changer. It was a bonfire. Brooks Tech Solutions. Even the name sounds like a dodgy IT bloke who takes 3 weeks to fix a printer. Revolutionary software, apparently, delivered nothing but excuses and 200-pound lunches. Investors furious. Nearly $2 million down the drain. Which explains why Mummy Dearest had her hand outstretched like she was at Sunday Communion. And Meline? Oh, she'd taken her grift into Broadway territory. Facebook full of weary, tragic selfies. Posts about her battle with cancer. Day 47 of chemo. She wrote, donations pouring in, strangers falling over themselves to fund her experimental treatments. Only problem? According to hospital records, the woman's biggest medical crisis was probably an overdone manicure. No chemo, no cancer, not even a dodgy mole removal. I nearly applauded. Nicholas blowing investor money on overpriced sashimi, while Mumsy fakes leukemia for sympathy cash. A mother-son double act. Bonnie and Clyde, but without the charm or the bullets. I compiled it all. Bank records, screenshots, testimonies, a little paper trail of fraud. So neat it could have got me a gold star in school. The irony was gorgeous. Me, the failure, had built a fortune out of dust and discipline. Them? They'd built a house of lies so rickety a stiff breeze could knock it flat. Evening fell, laptop shut, and I allowed myself a moment of smugness. I wasn't the victim anymore. Oh no, I was the author now. And this chapter was about to get delightfully messy. Phone rang. I let it, because sometimes silence is the loudest sod-off you can give. Next morning, before my coffee even finished brewing, I decided to poke the beast. Nicholas answered on the second ring. Surprised again. Honestly, I should have charged him for the cardio workout I was giving his poor little heart. I've got good news, I said. Remember those crypto losses? The tragic Bitcoin collapse. He did. Sounded almost cheerful about it, too. Well, I day traded my way back. Bought the dip, rode it up, nearly whole again. Pause. Exactly 3 seconds. I counted. Then, like clockwork. That's fantastic, Dad. I was worried about you. Of course he was. Terribly worried. The way vultures worry about running out of roadkill. So I dangled it. Maybe Christmas is back on? If the invitation still stands. Oh yes, of course it does. Mum will be thrilled. Sure she will. Thrilled like a cat is when you bring home a dog. And then came the real reason for the call. Nicholas shifted gears, voice soft, intimate, oily. Actually, Dad, since you recovered, there's this opportunity. Time sensitive. The kind of deal that could set me up for life. Of course. Nothing says Merry Christmas like your own son trying to sell you snake oil while his mom runs a GoFundMe for an imaginary tumor. So, apparently my son needed just 300,000 pounds. Now alone, mind you, heavens no, this was an opportunity. A golden ticket. Willy Wonka, but with spreadsheets. Dad, this isn't just about me, he said, pouring on sincerity like cheap cologne. It's about the family's future. Your grandchildren's future. Ah, the grandchildren. Always the grandchildren. As if dangling tiny humans in front of me would make me forget 2 decades of voicemail purgatory. And then came the piece de resistance. After everything that's happened between us, I thought this might be a way to start fresh. Beautiful. Truly. A masterclass of manipulation. Pull every emotional lever. Press every nostalgic button. Family, legacy, redemption. Honestly, if he'd whipped out a violin, I wouldn't have been surprised. Tell me more. I said, because I am nothing if not a generous audience. Cue the pitch. Tech sector. AI development. Revolutionary, apparently. Projected returns of 500% in 18 months. Same script he'd probably use on every investor he'd fleeced. I wondered if he even bothered to change the percentages, or if he just had them laminated on a flashcard. 500%? I asked, as if I hadn't just vomited in my soul. That sounds almost too good to be true. It does, but Dad, that's how these things work. Remember Bitcoin? Yes, son, I remember Bitcoin. I also remember tulips, Beanie Babies, and every other bubble in human history. Spoiler alert, most people end up broke, not billionaires. I let the silence do the heavy lifting. He filled it with desperation. But time is a factor. The window closes after Christmas. We need to move fast. Of course, manufactured urgency. The hallmark of every scam. By now before midnight or lose out forever. I half expected him to throw in a set of steak knives. I'll need to think about it, I said. That's all I can ask. Thanks for even considering it, Dad. It means everything. Yes, everything. Right up there with air and Wi-Fi. When the call ended, I leaned back, sunlight bouncing off my notepad where I wrote one word in capital letters. Confirmed. 20 years of silence. And now he wanted 300,000 pounds after a 5-minute phone call. The audacity was almost admirable. Almost. But here's the thing about being underestimated for decades. You learn patience. And patience, my friends, is a weapon. So, while Nicholas pranced about believing he'd hook me, I was busy loading the cannon. First call, a venture capital firm. Poor Mr. Davidson sounded exhausted before I even introduced myself. You're calling about Nicholas Brooks? He snapped. Oh, was I ever? He nearly fell off his chair when I told him where Nicholas had been hiding. Lincoln, Nebraska. Mummy's house. Hardly the Cayman Islands. And when I slipped him the address, phone number, and a neat little package of incriminating social media posts, the man practically kissed the receiver. Next, I rang the private investors. 3 of them, each a little angrier than the last. One woman, Helen Martinez, bless her, lost 50 grand to one of Nicholas's many flops. When I handed her evidence on a platter, she actually growled. By lunchtime, I'd turned 7 frustrated victims into a united front. By mid-afternoon, they were coordinating lawyers. By 3 o'clock, Nicholas's financial world was teetering on the edge of a collective lawsuit. Meanwhile, my phone buzzed like a wasp trapped in a pint glass. Davidson again. Mr. Anonymous, you've given us exactly what we needed. We're filing emergency motions to freeze his accounts. Days, not weeks. Merry Bloody Christmas. Nicholas. Another call. Helen this time. We're hitting him from all sides. No more hiding. You've given us hope. Hope. That's what I was now. Hope in a cardigan, sipping black coffee in a Lincoln kitchen. Who knew? By evening, I'd built a neat stack of consequences. Papers, screenshots, evidence. The kind of arsenal Nicholas never saw coming. He thought he was playing me. Sweet summer child. The game had already started, and I was the only one keeping score. I stared out the window. Snow everywhere. Clean, crisp, merciless. Perfect visibility for the reckoning. Then I opened my laptop, cracked my knuckles, and began an email to the local news station. Because if my son wanted to play games with other people's money, perhaps the good people of Lincoln deserved to know exactly what kind of neighbor they had. Allies secured, knives sharpened, metaphorically of course. I set off the next afternoon to collect the final delicious piece of evidence. St. Elizabeth's Hospital, east side of Lincoln. A brick box of antiseptic cheer. Snow clinging to its facade like a bad wig. The automatic doors whooshed open with all the enthusiasm of someone forced to work retail on Christmas Eve, and out came the hospital smell, bleach and broken dreams. I was instantly reminded of my heart surgery, the one my darling son Nicholas didn't bother showing up for. Too busy scamming pensioners, probably. Inside, the lobby was filled with people holding flowers and anxiety. I marched past them, all business, until I found Janet Morrison in medical records. Janet, old acquaintance from my accounting days, a woman with a conscience inconveniently larger than her desk. Stanley Brooks? What brings you here? She asked. Translation, why are you haunting my Tuesday with your nonsense? I need a favor, I said, flashing Davidson's business card like it was a police badge instead of cry for help. Her face sagged. What kind of favor? Fraud investigation, I said smoothly. Someone's claiming cancer treatments they've never had, collecting donations, heartstrings, sympathy, the whole fraudulent buffet. Janet blinked. Who? Melline Brooks, my ex-wife. The words at my tongue like bleach. She's been sobbing on Facebook about chemo sessions that never existed. Something flickered in Janet's eyes, the rare glint of a bureaucrat who hates lies almost as much as her job. She slid me the records 20 minutes later, and there it was, 5 years of clean medical history. Dental cleanings, sinus infection, the occasional vitamin deficiency. Not so much as a whiff of oncology, not a drip of chemo. Melline's cancer saga was faker than her crocodile tears. I sat in the car with the papers on my lap, glowing under fluorescent lights like divine judgment. Each page whispered, Congratulations, you were right. She's a liar. For half a second, I thought, maybe I've crossed an ethical line here, nicking medical records like some pound shop James Bond. Then I remembered the pensioners mailing her $20 notes in Christmas cards, thinking they were helping a dying woman cling to life. The light turned green. My moral compass adjusted itself. Sometimes justice wears gloves and gets a little grubby. Back home, I added the files to my growing arsenal. Investors, lawsuits, fraud evidence. 3 angles, 1 trap. Nicholas and Melline had spent 20 years believing they were the smartest people in the room. Tomorrow, we'd see how clever they look with lawyers gnawing at their ankles. That evening, the phone rang. I let it slide to voicemail. Who else but Nicholas or Melline? No doubt with another urgent crisis. Probably their fridge light stopped working, or they'd tragically run out of Sauvignon Blanc. I sipped my coffee, reviewing my little symphony of consequences. Christmas morning was going to be biblical. Christmas dawn bright and cold, the perfect weather for family revenge. I dressed carefully, respectable, but not so formal that I looked like I was heading to a funeral. Tempting, though. Their house sat in one of those soulless new developments where every building looks like it was copy-pasted by a bored architect. Vinyl siding, plastic smiles, and Christmas lights strung up like someone lost a fight with the extension cord. Nicholas opened the door with arms wide, as if we'd been sharing Sunday roasts for 20 years instead of avoiding each other like the plague. Dad, you made it, he gushed. I plastered on my grandfatherly grin. Yes, surprise. Melline slithered in behind him, thinner than I remembered, but with the same calculating eyes. She looked me up and down like she was pricing me for resale. Stanley, she cooed, so wonderful to see you. You look prosperous. Translation, are you still poor, or do we get to rob you again? Inside, the decor screamed new money with no taste. Expensive furniture that didn't match, designer handbags thrown around like set dressing, a television so large it probably had its own postcode. All, of course, funded by other people's wallets. Dinner was served on a table designed for 12, but cooked by the local deli. Nicholas carved the turkey with the pomp of a man auditioning for MasterChef, while Melline poured wine like she was hosting a reality TV reunion. They peppered me with questions. So fortunate you bounced back after the crypto fiasco, she said, eyes darting. Yes, I replied, slicing my turkey with surgical precision. I've learned to be careful about who I trust. Nicholas lit up like a child at Christmas, because, of course, he had an opportunity. He launched into his AI investment pitch, all timelines and urgency. The same tired lines he recycled since dial-up internet. I nodded along, feigning interest, while inside my head I thought, son, you could sell water in a desert and still end up in debt. And thus, Christmas dinner began. Turkey, lies, and the sweet anticipation of watching their little empire crumble. The knock came just as Meline was dishing out dessert, which, judging by the taste, had clearly been shop-bought and reheated with all the grace of a prison cook. Sharp, authoritative, the kind of knock that makes you instantly regret all your life choices, starting with being born. Nicholas frowned, fork abandoned midair. I wasn't expecting anyone. Of course he wasn't. Con men rarely pencil and get served with lawsuits into their festive schedule. At the door, a man in a dark coat, envelope in hand. Nicholas Brooks? Yes. Nicholas puffed up his chest. You've been served. Envelope, hand over, exit. A true professional. The kind of man who ruins Christmas for a living and doesn't even blink. Nicholas's face drained faster than his victim's bank accounts. This can't be right. What is it, honey? Meline hovered, the vulture circling. It's a lawsuit. Multiple lawsuits. They found me. His hand shook as he flipped through the stack. Emergency asset freezes, restitution demands, criminal fraud allegations. Basically, the greatest hits of things you don't want to see while eating pavlova. How did they even know where I was? He whispered, voice cracking like a teenager's. How indeed? I thought, polishing my grandfatherly concerned face, while inside I was popping metaphorical champagne. Oh no. Meline sighed, though not in a way that suggested she was actually sorry. Terrible timing. Right in the middle of Christmas dinner. These things have a way of catching up with people. I said mildly, sipping coffee like David Attenborough observing a predator about to eat its young. Nicholas began pacing, tugging at his hair, like it might magically produce legal advice. I need to call my lawyer. No, I need to get out of here. They could freeze everything, the house, the accounts, everything. How much do they want? Meline asked, because romance is dead, but financial calculations live forever. 2 million, plus damages, plus interest. He looked ready to vomit into the turkey. Meline turned to me with that same expression she perfected during our marriage, the one that always preceded a large purchase. New sofa, new car, new lie. Stanley, she said sweetly, I know this is awkward, but Nicholas is family. Our son. And with your recent good fortune, maybe you could help with the legal fees? Just until this gets sorted. Translation. Hand over your wallet, darling. We've cocked it up again. She reached for her phone, already preparing an invoice for my soul. I smiled. The patient smile of a man who survived 20 years of her manipulations and lived to tell the tale. Actually, Meline, I think you'll have bigger problems than legal fees very soon. That stopped her. I know someone who specializes in fraud cases, she said quickly, her voice hardening into that familiar, bossy determination. Brilliant lawyer, Facebook friend. She opened the app, her fingers moving like a magician revealing a trick. Then a red badge. 97 notifications. Oh, popular girl. I thought. She scrolled. Her smile collapsed. What the hell? Nicholas leaned over. The lawsuits were instantly forgotten, tossed aside like yesterday's scam. They're saying, I faked cancer, she whispered, color draining from her face. Look at these comments. Fraud. Scammer. Disgusting. Hundreds of them. I sipped my coffee. Delicious. She scrolled faster, breath coming in shallow bursts. There's a news article. Lincoln woman exposed for fake cancer scam. How did they, who would? Nicholas snatched the phone. Anonymous source provides medical records proving Meline Brooks never received cancer treatment despite collecting thousands in donations. His eyes snapped to her. Is it true? Of course it's not true, she cried, the world's least convincing performance. You know I'm fighting cancer. But even as she said it, you could see the doubt flickering behind Nicholas's eyes. He wasn't clever, but he wasn't that thick. The records were too official, too detailed. Jesus, Mum, do you know what this means? They'll investigate everything. My lawsuits, your donations, all of it. Meline's phone buzzed again. And again, messages piling in like angry bees. Donors demanding refunds. Reporters sniffing blood. Authorities wanting answers. Make it stop, she whispered. Make it stop? I can't make it stop. Nicholas snapped. You did this. You brought this on us. I didn't do anything. Someone set me up. And then, the piece de resistance, they both turned to me, suddenly remembering that Father Christmas was sitting right there at the table. Their faces, a cocktail of desperation and hope, the look of dicks reserved for dealers, and liars reserved for their last mark. Stanley, Meline purred, panic polished into sugar. You said you had a surprise for us. Please tell me you brought what we discussed. The money for Nicholas's investment. We need it more than ever. Nicholas nodded like an eager Labrador. Dad, we can fix this. With your help, lawyers, PR, we can make it all go away. I stood, slow and deliberate, setting my coffee cup down like it was a final act of Shakespearean tragedy. Actually, I said, buttoning my coat, I've already delivered your surprise. They froze. What do you mean? Meline's voice cracked, sharp with panic. I mean exactly what I said. I've already given you what you deserve. The money? Nicholas stammered. There is no money. Not for you. I opened the door, the winter air rushing in like judgment itself. Stanley, wait. You can't just leave, they cried. But I already had. The door clicked shut behind me, slicing their pleas in half. I walked to my car without looking back, though in the corner of my eye, I could see the glow of their Christmas lights, shining over the ruins of their perfect little con. And honestly, it was the best Christmas gift I'd ever given. Inside, I imagined they were still circling the wagons, desperately convinced they could charm, bargain, or gaslight their way out of consequences, as if life were just another Facebook marketplace haggle. Bless them. Meanwhile, I turned the key, my engine purred like a cat that hadn't been fed lies for 2 decades, and off I went. In the rear view, a figure appeared at the window, Nicholas, no doubt, watching me vanish like his credibility. 20 years of silence, dismissal in general. Oh, look, Dad's invisible. Now, for the first time, they had a taste of it. Equal parts poetic justice and Michelin star revenge. Days blurred into weeks. Reports trickled in, courtesy of Lincoln's most efficient delivery system. Gossip disguised as concern. The story didn't just walk. Oh no, it sprinted across town like a toddler who'd had too much Ribena. Janet from the hospital called first, whispering like she was a spy film. Stanley, I hope I did the right thing. Authorities contacted me about those records. Translation, she'd probably sung like a canary the second they waved paperwork at her. I'm sure you handled it appropriately, I said, stirring sugar into my coffee, which at that moment tasted sweeter than any justice system ever could. The local news picked it up, then the state papers. Apparently, nothing grabs the public imagination quite like a fake cancer scam. Bad business deals? People shrug those off. But fake chemo? That's a universal red flag. Updates became a sort of tragic soap opera delivered via supermarket aisles. Nicholas's legal battles? Swift, brutal, and about as fun as a colonoscopy without anesthetic. The investors had him filleted and served up before he'd finished his first pathetic. But my intentions, the judge? Less sympathetic than a traffic warden on commission. He lost everything. House, car, accounts. Had to move back in with his mom. Chef's kiss. Meline's fall from grace was even juicier. Her Facebook page had become the digital equivalent of a Rotten Tomato festival. Angry comments, refund demands, and the occasional hope you rot in jail meme for good measure. One local paper even ran a follow-up about how she'd been flogging miracle supplements alongside her fake chemo sob story. Because if you're going to be a fraud, why stop at one scam when you can bundle them like a Black Friday deal? Fraud charges are likely, Carol from the library told me, whispering like she was breaking Watergate. I just nodded, pretending to care while reorganizing the donated Danielle Steele novels. The most delicious update, however, came from Sarah, my postwoman, who was far more reliable than Sky News. Delivered a bunch of registered letters to that address yesterday, she said. legal documents. She reckoned the woman who answered, his mother, looked like she'd aged 10 years overnight. I thanked her and went inside, savoring the kind of peace you only get when karma finally does its bloody job for once. Spring arrived, and with a shocking revelation, life was actually quite nice when you weren't carrying a grudge the size of Yorkshire. It felt like recovering from a long illness, except instead of antibiotics, I'd been prescribed schadenfreude. I went on my first proper holiday in years, road tripping to the Rockies, staying in towns where nobody cared about my past because they were too busy living their own lives. In Colorado, I met a retired teacher called Margaret who taught adults to read. By the time I came home, I'd signed up to help with literacy programs. Imagine me teaching people words after years of being treated like mine didn't matter. Irony, table for one, at the community center, surrounded by people with real problems, job loss, illness, actual adversity, I realized how absurd my own decades of sulking had been. Their resilience made my bitterness look like a toddler's tantrum. Even Father Martinez noticed. "You seem lighter," he said, probably surprised I wasn't growling anymore. He was right. The old weight had gone. In its place, books, walks, honest conversations, and a general appreciation for not being fleeced daily by my ex-wife. I still had my modest house and my trusty Honda, the car equivalent of beige wallpaper. But now they felt like choices instead of limitations. I had the money to do more, sure, but why bother? Turns out contentment costs less than a Range Rover. Then, one evening, as I was planning a Grand Canyon trip, my phone buzzed. Caller ID, Nicholas. I let it ring. Later, I listened. A tragic cocktail apology, excuses, and please send money. Delete. My thumb has never felt so powerful. The next morning, I packed my suitcase anyway. The canyon could wait. First stop, Kansas, a town rebuilding after a tornado. For once, someone might need me for the right reasons, rather than for checkbook acrobatics. As I pulled out of my driveway, I glanced at the house I'd once haunted like a ghost, waiting for calls that never came. And I realized I'd been waiting for the wrong thing entirely. The road ahead was empty, full of possibilities, and blessedly free of Brooks family drama. I pressed the accelerator, leaving the past in the rear-view mirror, shrinking smaller and smaller, like Nicholas's bank balance. And you know what? For the first time in decades, I wasn't waiting for a phone call, a favor, or a half-hearted apology. I was just waiting for the petrol station to have a working coffee machine. Because at the end of the day, you can't buy peace, you can't fake cancer, and you definitely can't con karma. But you can apparently still con yourself into thinking powdered cappuccino counts as a life choice. Mic drop.